Components are reusable elements that help you build faster and better in WeWeb. With components, you can have a more consistent design throughout your application. For example, let's take a button that you designed on one page. You don't want to build the same button from scratch on another page. You want to have the exact styling that you put inside of it and the exact logic of that button to your new button. And that's when components are useful. You only need to build your component once and then create instances of that component where you want to use it. And each of these instances will hold the same logic, the same information, and the same styling that you defined on the first place. And having just one place to define these elements doesn't mean that each instance will have the same data. With props, you can also have some variation on these instances depending on how you set it up. Components are a very powerful tool for your web application, and today let's try and build a card component from scratch and see how it works. And for our example, let's say that we are building a course platform and we need to showcase the course of that platform. So here are the cards that we are going to build in WeWeb. These cards are composed of a few elements. At the top we have a feature tag, and at the bottom we have the days remaining until the course closes, the number of students, the name of the course, and the description. And on the left there are a few elements that are not displayed. That's because basically we will have two different cards. Before building our components, I will build it first not as a component, and then we will transform what I've built into a proper component that can be reused throughout the application. I will fast forward a bit on this part since it's not the main focus of that video, and I will see you just after that. Okay, so now here's our cards. And obviously these tags could also have been components, tag components, but in our example we are only going to make the whole card as a component. And I think that we are ready now to transform this as a component. To do that, we are going to select the card div, and at the top right corner we have a button, new component. So we are going to click that and name that card course, for example, and create the component. When we do that, we can see that the canvas is grayed out. That means that we are in edit mode of the component, and at the top right corner we have a new tab that has appeared which holds all the elements of our component. We have properties, data, actions, and events. I invite you to go see the WeWeb documentation to see what each of these sections do. But for example, we will only need the properties and a formula. So the idea is that we are going to create properties and bind those properties to our elements to display data. The properties are a way to attribute data to each of the instances, and we are going to see how exactly this works. So the first properties that we are going to create will be the text properties for the title and for the description. So I'm going to click new here, and I'm going to create the title property. The type will be text, and if I open the select here, we can see there are a bunch of types, and for now we are going to select the text one. We can have a default value if we want, and we can also have advanced settings. The advanced settings are basically to show where the properties are going to appear and if we need to have some more control depending on the state or the breakpoint, etc. We're not going to use that for our case, but these options are here. We're going to click create. If I select my title element here, I can now bind this to this property. For now it's undefined because we haven't put any default value and we haven't specified anything on the instance. But now that it's bound, we can go back, we can leave the edit mode and select our instance, and on the new title property here we can add our title. And now that we have done that, anything that we input here will be reflected on the title element. And now we can do that for the other text, which is our description. I can go back by double clicking on the card and create a new property that will be our description with also a text type, and I'm going to bind that to this new property. Awesome. The next one that we are going to create will be for the number of students. Let's call that student count. And this student count will be of type number, and we can have a default value of 0, for instance, and we're going to bind that to our text, and we can see that we only have the number showing because our property is only a number. But to display the word students at the end, we can concatenate it by using the plus, and between quotes we can add students. And now we can see that we have the property number at the beginning followed by the string students. And if I go back here and I input 10, we have 10 students. The next one we can do can be the image. If I go back to my property, I can select the image type. Let's call that cover. And I can select my image here, my cover image, and bind that to the new cover property. And if I go back to my instance, I can go and select any image that I want, and it will be applied. And just to show you, I can duplicate my component here, and I can enter basically any other property that I want. It will all be based on the same properties, but with some variation depending on the data that I input on each instance. What's remaining would be our feature tag and also the days remaining. Let's start with the feature tag. We want to display the featured card if on our collection we have a Boolean set to true. For that, we're going to create a new property with type Boolean, and let's call that featured. By default, we can set that to true. And if we select our tag components here, I can go to the settings tab and down to the conditional rendering and bind the condition to this new Boolean property. And if I go back to my instance, I can toggle on and off that tag. Awesome. The last one is a bit more complicated because let's say that on our collection we don't have the number of days remaining. We would only have the date at which the course closes. So how do we calculate how many days there are? For that, we're going to use a formula. A formula is a way to calculate things with properties. Let's call our formula remaining days. Our formula will have one parameter, which will be the date at which the courses ends, and that will be of type text. And for example, our format of date will be something like this. Make it the 6th of April. So this is only a test value to see what result we have with this formula. And what we want to do is we want to compare today's date to the date of our component. To do that, we have the date plugin and we have a bunch of formulas, and the one that will be interesting to us will be the compare date. The compare date takes in 3 parameters: the first date, the second date, and how we want to display the difference between those dates. So if I click on it, I have our 3 spaces, and the first one will be the date of today. I can use this function here that returns today's date, and then I will need to create a date out of my string here. So I'm going to use the same formula, but inside of it I'm going to add our parameter. So this creates a date out of our string, and then I need to specify how I want the value to be returned. And by imputing day, I want to return the number of days between those 2 dates. So I get the right results and I can create that. And now I'm going to use that to display the days remaining. First, I need to add a date property to my instances. So I'm going to add a new property text. Let's call that date. I'm going to hit create. For each of my instances, I'm going to create a date. So let's do the 10th, and this one will be like the same, 6th. Now that we have access to our new property, we can go back to our tag component here, and in the content of our text, we want to use the remaining days, and inside of our remaining days, we need to input the date of our instance. And we can see now that we have 7 for the first one, and 3 for the second one, which is exactly the remaining days between today and the date. But we are going to do the same as the students. We're going to add a little bit of text after our number. So it would be 7 days remaining. So you have the full tag here. And maybe to take it a step further, maybe we just want to display this tag when there are less than 4 days before the course closes. For that, it's a bit similar than what we did on the featured tag. We're going to go to the conditional rendering. We're going to bind this, but instead of binding it to a Boolean, we're going to bind it to the remaining days. We're going to say that if the number of remaining days is less than 4, then it will be true, and if it's more than 4, then it will be false and the tag won't be displayed. So there you have it. We have all the different elements that are showing depending on some data of each instance. And to take it a step further, we said at the beginning of the video that we wanted to have 2 different types of card, a simple one and a more complex one. To have that variation, we are going to create a new property that will be a select. And let's call that a variant. And we're going to add 2 options to our variants. The first one will be the simple, and the second one will be complex. By default, let's say that we want the complex one. And now, back to our instance, let's say that the first one is the simple and the second one is the complex. On the simple one, we just want to hide the description text. And to do that, we can select our description, go back to our conditional rendering, and bind that to the variant, and say that if it's equal to complex, let's put that between quotes, then it will be true. Else, if it's not equal to complex, then it will be false. And just like that, I can go between complex and simple and displaying the description or not, depending on the use case. we have completed our component now, but it's not very useful to have all this data written by hand. What we want is that all of this information will come from our collection. So let's try to bind our collection to our list. First, I'm going to delete the second one here, and I'm going to wrap this one inside of a grid. This grid will have, let's say, 4 columns, and I'm going to link that to a collection. I have a collection here that has all the data that we covered on our component. So I'm going to select this one. And we see that it's all repeating well. Let's add a bit of gap. And we can see that weirdly my cards are overflowing on the right. And that's because when we first designed our card, we put a fixed width on it. So I'm going to go back on our cards and I'm going to reset the styling here. And for the style, we could leave it. And now the fun part is when we are going to bind all our information on the card to the collection. So I'm going to select my card here and I'm going to bind all my information to the collection. And there you have a dynamic card list made of components. And if I use it on another page and then if I make changes, then it will be reflected on each instances. So that's how we create a simple component in WeWeb. They are an amazing tool to scale your web app, and you can make so much more complex ones depending on your use case and all of that without the need of code, and that is amazing. If you found this useful, don't hesitate to hit the like button, to subscribe, and tell me in the comments if you want to see another component built or if you have any question about WeWeb. And with that, see you on the next one.